e6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, Fischer castles, bishop g5, d6. If instead of d6, h6, bishop e3, d6, f3, followed by queen d2. Let us go back. What is played is d6, queen d2. Better is simply, let us go back and see. Better is simply bishop e2, d5, e6, knight f3, h6, bishop h4, or let us go back and see. The last move played is queen d2. After queen d2, c5 is played. c5 is a good move. Szabo, the Hungarian grandmaster, played d5. Instead of d5, let us go back and see. Knight f3, c into d4, knight into d4, knight c6, or after d5, instead of knight f3, d into c5. Let us go back and see this also. D into c5, queen into d8, rook into d8, e5, knight g4, f4, f6. But what is the last move played is d5, e6, bishop d3, e into d5. After e into d5, knight into d5 is played. Bishop e6, knight e2, bishop into d5, e into d5, releasing the tension in the center and by forcing white to recapture with a pawn, eliminating the backward queen pawn on the open file. On c into d5, let us go back and see what is that. On c into d5, bishop c2, knight b d7, 0-0, that is castles, knight c5, knight c3, b5. b5 is a good move. Let us go back and see. What is played is e into d5, knight b d7, Szabo castles. Instead of castling, let us go back and see. Not f4, queen e8, threatening, knight d4, queen c2, knight g4, invading on the dark weak square. So let us go back and see. Last move played is castling, knight e5, f4. f4 is a bad move. Why? Instead of that, knight c3 is better, which gives even game to black and white. But what is played is f4. f4 is a weak move. Knight into d3. queen into d3, h6, bishop h4, rook e8, rook a e1. Instead of that, knight c3 is the best of the bad choices. So let us go back and see. According to Bobby Fischer, knight c3 is somewhat better. Queen b6 is a excellent move. So many threats follows it. If h3, knight h5. If h3 is not played, knight g4. All these moves increases the pressure on the king side, white's king side. What the last move played is rook a e1, queen b6. Queen b6 is a excellent move. Bishop into f6. Instead of bishop into f6, b3. Let us go back. b3, knight e4. Knight e4 is a excellent move. But what is played is bishop into f6. Bishop into f6. f5. Trying to open black's king side. g5 is played, closing everything. b3, queen a6. A nettlesome maneuver. White plays rook c1. Instead of rook c1, a4, bishop d4 check, king h1, or knight into d4, rook into e1, or after king h1, rook e3, queen d1, rook a e8. But what is played is rook c1. Let us go back and see. What is played is rook c1 in the game. Queen into a2, rook c2. Fischer plays an excellent move. Rook e3, queen into e3, queen into c2, king h1, a5, h4, a4. After a4, white resigns because white's pawn fall like a ripe apple. And this game is played between Szabo of Hungary, a Hungarian grandmaster, and Bobby Fischer of USA in Leipzig Olympic in 1960. The opening is King's Indian Defence. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your time. Please subscribe so that you can see all the beautiful games of Bobby Fischer.